We want to correct before we, certainly before we let them have their own piece of technology to navigate. Yeah. We want to help correct their view and see all that we do as a part of a sacred life that we lead. So recently, Brett was at a local event here in Southern California, and he, after a talk you gave, you had a question answer time. And some of the questions were so hard that you needed my help in answering them. So
exactly. I told the audience, I said, guys, I'm going to have to cut the Q&A here short.
Yeah.
Erin's not here. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take these questions home.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let her answer them.
I mean, that sounds like
plausible.
Something that really happened. So he brought these questions home and said, honey, I need your help in answering these. So I said, well, let's hook up the microphones and answer these questions, Brett. So
I'm glad you're entertaining yourself, funny.
So he did get some questions that apparently he didn't have time to answer, but we all know the truth. He wanted my help in answering them. So
I wanted to plumb the depths of your wisdom and knowledge. Actually, I did an event. It's a local church here in Southern California. If you are in Southern California and you are in the Long Beach or Lakewood area, there's a great church out there called Arbor Road Church. And in fact, I think I had mentioned to some in the audience that because there were so many questions that we would do a podcast answering some of these questions. So hopefully some people from Arbor Road Church are listening. Otherwise, we're wasting our time here.
Little did they know that you were just putting it off to get some help from me. It's well, all right. You can say it.
One of the talks that I did was on technology. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're just going to deal with the technology questions here because there's plenty of them. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is just something we probably haven't done an episode on the podcast on technology in a while. So it's probably good to revisit it because it is something that we constantly have to be vigilant on as parents.
We did do a 3-part series, I think, on technology.
Something like that, a while back.
A little while ago, yeah. So if you are interested, you could scroll through the podcast episodes and listen back to that. But we always like to take specific questions because sometimes there's something we didn't touch on or haven't thought through or whatever. And of course, we have been dealing with technology and kids for quite a while. Our oldest is 27. So when she started asking for a cell phone in elementary school, you know, that's when kids started to get cell phones. They were flip phones back then. And I remember she was 5th or 6th grade. I think it was 5th grade. But anyway, she said, you know, Mom, everybody has a phone and I need a phone too. And I was like, well, why would you need a phone? She said, well, I'll call you or I'll text you when I get out of school. And I said, girl, I know when you get out of school, I'm there every day waiting for you to get out of school. Like
oh my gosh, for all of these years, I've been struggling because I haven't known exactly when you walked out the door at school.
Which is really actually true what I said. I'm not making that up, which shows I'm a little bit of a sassy mother. But
Did you actually say girl to her?
Yes, I did. Because I say that to our girls. But I felt her argument was weak. And so I needed her to give me more. And, you know, and then she said, well,
Did you
I'll
crush
call
her
you.
with facts and logic?
I'll call you. She said, I'll call you when I get out of practice. I'm like, again, I know when you get out of practice. But anyways, I mean, she's 27. So this was, you know, a long time ago. And since then, cell phones have evolved.
We are young parents. I mean,
we were young parents.
10 when we had her. So that makes us 37 now.
Yes. Yeah. So we've been dealing with technology for a long time with our kids. And so we are in this group of parents that probably a lot of you listening are in, that we have had to grow in our knowledge and navigating and figuring out how to handle technology with kids. It's a big topic.
Okay. Are you trying to build our credibility here? Is that what you're doing?
No, I was sharing part of our story.
To build our credibility.
No, because certainly...
Hopefully our story gives us some credibility.
Well, it certainly will. The more we share about our story, the more we'll demonstrate the mistakes that we've made, if that's
the
what
less
you mean.
credibility we have. Okay, so let's stop sharing our
Maybe I'm building,
stop sharing our story
I'm
right
building
now.
our relatability. Maybe that's what I'm doing.
All right.
Okay, so the first question, actually, this person said, I've got a ton of questions. So here's...
Answer whichever you can or want.
Okay.
First question, how do you handle technology in your family? Pass. We're going to pass on that. I don't want to answer that. How can we go about a conversation with a child in technology?
Okay.
Pass. Pass on that one too. Okay, go back to the first one. How do you handle technology in your family? That's a big, broad question. Where do you start on that?
Where did we start in that? Well, we started by stumbling into, as I said, kind of stumbling into this because for one thing, we didn't have older parents at that point, that we could say, hey, how did you guys handle it? Like now your kid's in college. How did you handle this when they were in elementary school? Because when their kid...
You mean we didn't have older parents friends?
Right.
It sounds like you're saying we didn't have older parents.
Oh,
and
sorry.
I'm like, yeah, our parents were actually older than us.
We didn't have... Well, I'm revealing my go-to, right? My go-to is to ask... I like to talk to parents who are older and wiser, who have been through things.
Like me.
Like you.
I'm older and wiser. I'm a parent. Yes.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
an older,
You're
wiser
admitting that you're older than me? So that's my tendency. So that's my point. Parents who had kids in college when our daughter was in elementary school didn't have to deal with phones when their kids were in elementary school because we have been growing up as parents with this.
Yeah.
And so there weren't a ton of resources even at that point or books that were like, here's how to handle technology. There definitely was books about TV and stuff like that. But anyway, so overall, how do we handle technology with our family? Well, that is a huge question. I think in general, our approach has been to try to talk through it with the kids. Like my sassy answer with Lexi is like, why would you need one? That was a sassy response to a question that we really asked was, okay, why would you need this thing? Or what purpose would this serve? Mm-hmm. Would this be good for you to have?
Yeah. Well, I think there's some framing issues here, right? The Christian worldview should frame everything. And so we have this piece, technology or smartphones, and it fits in this larger Christian worldview. I think that's what you're saying here is like, okay, why would you need this? What is the purpose of this thing?
And would it be good?
And would it be good? And all of that is answered by, or our starting point is, really, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? God is the creator of this world. What commands has he given us? That's the starting point for our thinking about technology. So how should we handle technology in our families? I think we should start by thinking through these important kind of questions that you're raising here and that Scripture raises. And so one question that we would add that frames our whole entire life is, what does technology do, or how does technology help me to love God, right, the great commandment, and love my neighbor, the second great commandment, right? These are the two greatest commandments for every believer. These questions should frame our lives. These questions should drive our lives. This is what we're for, to love God and love neighbor. And so everything that we have and that we do fits into that somehow, or should fit into that as a follower of Jesus. And so the question is, all right, technology, how does it fit into that? And some people might be thinking, it doesn't. Like, how in the world does technology have anything to do with loving God? Well, if that were the case, then yeah, maybe we should abandon technology. But I think we can say, well, no, there's a lot of different ways technology can help us to love God. Number one, technology helps us to do our work, right? So to complete work, to be more effective at work, to accomplish work through email or online activity or whatever it might be, helps us to accomplish work. Work is a good thing. Work is God honoring. We are to work to earn, an income and support our families. But even in the work itself can be glorifying to God by doing work with excellence, right? Whatever you do your work as for the Lord rather than for men. And we would spend time, I think, thinking through that question ourselves as parents, and then thinking through those questions with our kids. I mean, obviously the second great commandment, love your neighbor. We should be thinking through, how do we love our neighbor with our technology, right? Is, leaving that rude Facebook comment or comment on Instagram or whatever, is that loving our neighbor? Those are the kinds of things I think that we want to think through.
That's a bad example of how we can not love our neighbors, but I think about how much good technology does do when you think about how you can check in on a sick friend or someone who's hurting. Mm-hmm. You can text them or call them and check in, and really the good of technology. Like I'm thinking about how one of our adult children got into a fender bender this morning and called us and was upset, and we talked him through it. But just having that technology that they had a phone there that they could call us, we calmed them down, these sorts of things that can help you to love people and reach out to people. And so there is so much good to it. I think a lot of times as parents, because we see how much bad technology brings, that our instinct is to always go to bad. And we do need to reflect on that, because certainly, like I've just doing some thought on technology myself lately, and I've thought about how technology has made me so much more impatient than I used to be for like ordering a coffee or getting somewhere when my maps thing is slow to load on my phone and I need an answer quick. Like technology has made me more impatient. So anyway, this whole broad thing, and really in that 3-part series we did kind of lay out a Christian view, a biblical view of how to even view technology as a family. So that is a good place to start as parents, to really think through it, so that we have good answers and we have good questions when our kids come to us. Now it's early and earlier ages. The average age now of someone getting an iPhone is 10 years old. And so that age now is dropping lower and lower. So when your 9 or 10-year-old comes to you and says, hey, I want a phone, as parents, if we have thought through this, it does aid us in those conversations. Yeah.
So I think in the broad sense, how do we handle technology in our family? The answer is we first make sure we have a Christian worldview in place. The Christian worldview should frame every activity. Mm-hmm. It gives us the framework by which we can think about everything, every square inch of reality, including our digital technology. So when a kid comes to you and says, oh, I want this phone, all my friends have it, then we know that the starting point really is, hey, let's ask them some questions. Mm-hmm. Well, why do you want that? Well, what's that thing for? What in Scripture would inform, would help you to think through whether or not you should even get this thing at this point, and having those kind of deep conversations with our kids. And that, that's related to the second question here. How can we go about a conversation with a child in technology? Yeah,
because I think what you said about thinking about technology from a Christian worldview, what we're talking about, to most people is such a foreign idea, because we've separated so much of what we do outside of the realm of our faith, of Christianity.
Yeah, you have that sacred secular
Mm-hmm.
split,
Yeah.
right? You have the sacred things like your devotions or Bible study or church, the things you do with God, and then the rest of your life, like business and going to work and going to watch a movie and using technology.
Yeah.
And that is not a Christian view. That is a secular view of reality. What we want to do is just smash that division and say all of reality is infused with God, and we need to figure out how all of this stuff fits into our Christian worldview. That's why we should have a theology of technology. Like before you have a conversation with your kid on technology, you've got to have a theology of technology, you know, and it starts with Genesis 1. God made us. He made us in his image. And so we are co-creators or sub-creators with, with God being made in his image. We're able to make things. In fact, the second command in that the cultural mandate is not only be fruitful and multiply, but then secondly, subdue the earth and rule over it. The taking of natural resources and making technology, that's image bearers fulfilling the cultural mandate. We're making culture, creating culture, and creating artifacts of culture. And so all of that helps us to have that. I mean, that's where the conversation actually needs to start with our kids. So they can see, you know what, my Christian faith, my Christian views, scripture is relevant to this issue of technology. And so that's the starting point. And I don't know, I'm just thinking, gosh, that might sound odd to a lot of parents.
Yeah. Which actually reminds me of a quote. And we have in our family this book of liturgies called Every Moment Holy. And Andrew Peterson writes the foreword in it. And this is what he says. It talks about this sacred, secular, we compartmentalize things. But he says, Wendell Berry wrote, "There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places." In that spirit, this book reminds us that there are no unsacred moments. There are only sacred moments, and moments we have forgotten are sacred. If that's true, then it is our duty to reclaim the sacredness of our lives, of life itself. So you think about that with technology, something that's such a big part of all of our lives. And if we look at it, technology as like this unsacred thing, this secular thing we participate in, or if our kids view it that way, we want to correct certainly before we let them have their own piece of technology to navigate. We want to help correct their view and see all that we do as a part of a sacred life that we lead.
And Gen Zers, which is our kids, and most kids 20 and under right now, they spend on average 6 to 9 hours in front of a screen. And so if they're spending 6 to 9 hours in front of the screen and they view it all as secular, it's completely disconnected from their faith. That is a large chunk of their life, completely disconnected from their faith. So that's where our discussions have to start. Now, here's a very practical question. Should technology be allowed in their rooms? Should we let our kids take their smartphones into their rooms?
Well, actually, that would, in my mind, I'm thinking smartphones, iPads, televisions, computers. And the answer in our home is no. There's a rare instance where they'll watch a movie together or something, in their room or something like that. There, of course, have been exceptions to this rule, but pretty much we have a no screens in the room policy. Now, we do that for good reason, because we know that, for one thing, when you're on technology and no one's around to hold you accountable, not just to what you're watching, but how much you're on the screen, that not only hours and hours can be wasted, but also that no one is there watching it with you, that you become so isolated in your use of technology that even in that you become, studies have shown that screens in the bedrooms of children are dangerous things. And so we didn't just come to this on our own. I mean, it's because of our study and research, but also just intuitively, we know when kids go back into their rooms and they're on their iPads or phones or TVs, we don't know what they're watching. We don't know when they started watching it, when it ended, all of those sorts of things. There's just zero accountability. And most kids don't have the discernment that you really need to navigate something like an iPad or a phone that has access to the internet and all sorts of things.
Yeah, they haven't developed the self-control
Yeah.
and the habits. And so, yeah, it's a general rule in our home. No screens in the rooms. Of course, there are exceptions, and of course it doesn't mean we're Nazis about it. Where you walk into the room and the phone was in your pocket, we're like, "What are you doing, bringing that in the room?" But in general, yeah. In fact, we've one of our kids had a computer in the room at their desk that we just saw how it nudged them to be on that screen a lot. Mm-hmm. And so we moved that into a public place, kind of in the home.
Yeah.
And so...
and particularly at bedtime, this is something that we are actually sticklers about.
Nazis. Oh, should I use that term,
no,
Nazis?
No, I don't like it.
Because your face kind of wrinkled up when I first said it. And I was like, well, no.
Did it?
Yeah.
I don't realize how much my face reveals, or maybe just to you. Maybe the average person.
I have intimate knowledge of
I know I didn't like when you said Nazis about it. But anyway, so
we are sticklers. Taliban about it. Is that a better? No. Oh, okay. That doesn't work either.
Oh, my word.
Okay, we are sticklers. Did you say sticklers publicly? That's what old people say.
Oh, really?
We are sticklers. Oh my gosh.
Okay,
somebody please email us.
We
Give
are
us
firm.
A word, synonym.
We need a trendy word that doesn't include like
there
mass
are no
murderers.
Trendy words there's no trendy words for sticklers.
Okay,
no.
so
it's not
anyway,
trendy to be a stickler.
We stand firm in actually right behind us is a desk in our living room area, and that has our charging station, and it has all these slots for cell phones and iPads. And, for the kids growing up in this home who get to have a phone eventually, it's charged up out here in the community area at bedtime. Again, just studies have shown
there's correlation with, a kid takes their smartphone into their bed. There's obviously that's going to correlate with higher amount of time that they're using that. And then, of course, all the apps that are on it. And then it also correlates with greater rates of depression and anxiety, those kind of things, because we know social media is it's constantly nudging them to harmful things.
Yeah, and not just them. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, but I noticed in myself several years ago that I was charging my phone by my bed, and I was staying up reading articles and doing things on my phone. And I saw in myself how it was increasing the anxiety in my own life. So I also charge my phone at the charging station out here, and have done it for years with the kids because of what I saw even in myself. And I've talked to the kids about that and told them that. Yeah. So another thing about that is how we handle technology as a family, that we talk about it, how it affects us too, with our kids. We've had many honest conversations with our kids about how it affects us, and habits that we purposely do, like turning it off on certain days when we're resting, and turning it off when we're on trips, family trips or whatever, things like that.
Yeah.
So we do try to handle it together as a family.
Okay, let's keep moving on through these questions. Should I have their passwords / read their texts? The answer to that question in our home is yes, have their passwords and read their texts.
Yeah, and not just in the advice of people who study teenagers and technology say parents should have the passwords of their young people. It's wise to do that. It's unwise not to.
Well, I think, I mean, if you aren't reading some of the stuff, some of the books out there on technology and what it can do and some of the challenges, like in particular, just Google Jean Twenge, Twenge. She's a psychologist, and Jonathan Haidt, which is Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. The both of them have been working on recent studies and research into young people and smartphone use, social media use, and man, they are making some, I think, some strong arguments that we need to severely limit some of this stuff, and so, but anyway, with passwords and reading their texts, I think this probably for a lot of modern parents, definitely for the kids, this sounds crazy and radical, but even for a lot of parents. And there's this sense of like, am I invading their privacy? Right? And our view in our home was, when it comes to technology, you have no right to privacy. Like there are general rights to privacy, of course, as an American citizen. Okay, as an American citizen, you got some right to privacy. In our home, there's pretty much three things where you have a right to privacy. Correct me if I'm wrong. But number one, when you're changing your clothes, you want to change your clothes, we don't want to see that. We would actually prefer you have a right to privacy, okay? Number two, when you're using the restroom, again, don't want to be there, you got a right to privacy. Number three, if you keep a journal. If you have a private journal that you write your thoughts in, and hey, you got a right to privacy, we won't pry into that. Besides that, I can't think of another area where any of us, not just our kids, but any of us has a right to privacy.
Yeah. This was actually an objection we dealt with one of our kids.
Yeah.
The claim that they deserved the right to privacy with their phone. And the way that we handled it was that you said, okay, so if I said that to mom, you said.
If mom said, I want to read your text, Brett, and my response was this.
And your response to me was, hey, I have a right to privacy. What's on my computer and on my phone, hey, that's off limits to you, honey. Stuff. You can't read that. And then you asked our child, what
do you think mom would think?
If you claimed a right to privacy?
Yeah, would she be suspicious? How would she handle that? And our kid said, well, mom would fly off the handle. She'd freak out. She'd start hitting you.
No, they didn't.
Oh, okay. They didn't say that. But she said, mom would be suspicious that you were doing something you shouldn't be doing. And kind of begrudgingly answered that, but knowing that was the right answer. I said, absolutely. And then I reinforced, I said, hey, look, I'm not asking you to do anything I don't submit myself to. I said, anytime mom wants to read my texts, look at my emails, go onto my social media, whatever she wants to do, she has 100% access. My laptop, my smartphone, anything, she can have a look anytime. Because number one, I need accountability. I need accountability even as a full-grown man, right? I'm always going to need accountability because I have the residue of sin in my life as a fallen human being. I'm going to, struggle with sin, and I need accountability. And so, in the same way, daughter, you are going to struggle with sin, and you need accountability. And so, there will be times when we read your texts, and there will be times when we have your passwords and we look at your social media accounts because, there are so many spaces now that are free from accountability that can nudge you to get into all kinds of trouble and do things that maybe not even just sinful behaviors, but behaviors that are unhealthy, that are harmful to you, or that nudge you in the wrong directions in terms of maybe smartphone addiction or those kind of things. So it's really because of our care and concern and wanting to have appropriate accountability, that we have passwords and we read texts.
Yeah. And I think that again reminds us that the things that we're calling our kids to, that we're saying, hey, we want to give you this accountability, isn't anything less than we're doing ourselves too. And that again is how you can approach this as a family. Dad and I know all the passwords. We have access to each other's stuff. And so we're basically treating you the same way, like an adult who needs accountability. It's not because we think less of you. It's because we actually think of you as a young adult and know that you need this help.
Yeah. And, what's interesting is that the more that you show responsibility, this is what we communicate with the kids, the more that you show that you're responsible, the more that you grow in your character and maturity, the less you need that accountability, because now you don't need just the outside accountability. You have the internal accountability of your own character and virtue. So I would say especially at the outset, there's more accountability.
Yes.
But then as they grow and they show us that they're trustworthy and responsible, there's more freedom that comes with that. And that is, I think that's a real important lesson in every area of life that we really miss out on in modern life, is that freedom it comes when responsibility is fulfilled. You don't just get freedom no matter what, but there's responsibility, there's honor, there's, obligation, and then there's freedom.
Yeah. And I think this is a good area also to talk about with our children on the area of trust, like you're saying, especially on the onset of them getting a phone or technology for the first time, that the conversation is about, these are the boundaries we're putting on it. And we want to build trust in you in this area. And we know you're capable of doing this. So like the early curfew with the phone or the screen limit time, these are the boundaries we're putting them on now. Now, as you show trust and responsibility, we can lessen this because you've shown that you can handle it. But if you show us that you aren't trustworthy in this, then there will be consequences to that. But this is how you build trust. And technology is another area where our kids can either earn trust with us or break trust with us. But it's part of the whole deal with technology. It's part of the relationship with other people that you're in. Again, our relationship with them isn't just about our relationship with them. We're teaching them how to live life outside of our home. And so that this is part of that.
Yeah. And we communicate those expectations up front. Before you ever hand over any piece of technology, make sure you communicate boundaries that you've set in your home up front. So before we give our kids a smartphone, like there's an agreement. Hey, we will be reading text. We will be getting your passwords. And if a kid doesn't agree to that, then okay, that's all right. Well, then you're not going to get the smartphone. You're not going to get this piece of technology because these boundaries are in place because we care too much about you. And so there's an agreement there. And we have reasons why. I think that's another thing we would say when it comes to technology is that we always give a reason why. We don't just have arbitrary rules, but these rules are backed with some good reasons. Okay?
Which is, I think, another thing I would mention. You talked about the different researchers that people can look up information in books. I think you should be reading this stuff with your kids. So if you go on Twitter and you read this recent research, well, read it with your teenagers and say, okay, what do you guys think about? Is this what you see?
Yeah.
And have a conversation about it. Because I personally know a lot of teenagers who are so defensive about this topic of technology, and especially when their parents bring it up with them. And I think part of it is because they feel like their parents are always negative on it. But I also think part of it is they're defensive because they want unlimited freedom with it. and they don't want the boundaries their parents. So I get that this is a tough thing, but like one of the books we love is The Tech Wise Family by Andy Crouch. And we've read parts of that book with our kids and talked through it as a family.
Well, and there's a student version of that one,
Yeah.
My Tech Wise Life, which is written by Andy and his daughter, Amy, I think it is. And that could be, the parent could read Tech Wise Family and the student could read My Tech Wise Life. And that will foster a lot of conversation and really help get parents and students on the same page on this.
Yeah. The other book I had mentioned too, a resource that would be great to read with your kids is Screens and Teens with our friend Kathy Cook, wrote that.
Koch, not C-O-K.
Kathy, yes.
Okay.
She wrote that book, and her approach is very much, it's not gloom and doom about technology. It's, hey, technology is here. It's in our lives. How do we deal with it in a family with teenagers, all of those things. So reading the things together can help with, this is why we hold each other accountability. This is why we do what we do.
Yeah. All right, here's another question. This is a different question or a different questioner. So that was a bunch of questions from one person last night or at the event that I was at. Okay, so this is another one. What age should a child get a cell phone? That's a very practical question. Okay, Erin, what age? What's the age? Give us the exact age, the exact date that they should get a cell phone.
Yeah, that there's no way to answer that question, first of all. I mean, this is why parents, you are in the best position to make these decisions for your kids. Because you know your children better than anyone else on the planet. And you know what they're capable of. I mean, so let's go back to the fact that the average age now for an iPhone is a 10-year-old. So we happen to have a 10-year-old in our house right now who I have to remind every
smartphone, we'd be in big
trouble.
trouble.
I'm just thinking about, okay, could our 10-year-old handle an iPhone? Well, I have to remind him twice a day, in the morning and at night, to brush his teeth. I have to remind him to shower. I have to remind him to do all sorts of things. Did you pack a fruit or vegetable in your lunch? So is someone like that capable of handling an iPhone that gives them access to the entire internet? I mean, my answer would be no. I mean, he's struggling to survive at this point. If it wasn't for us, he's
hanging on by a thread.
So he has a lot to learn, right? I mean, and of course, he's 10. He's supposed to need this help still. So would I hand our 10-year-old a cell phone? I mean, no, they're absolutely not. Yeah. We have neighbors that have, their 8-year-old has a cell phone. So, every parent obviously is in the best position to make the decision for their kids. But I understand.
Well, are you saying that the 8-year-old having a cell phone, that's good because the parent gave it?
No, I'm not. I didn't say it was good. I didn't actually make a
no, you were
claim
describing it, though, but you're saying every parent knows
every
what's
parent
best,
has
and so
to
we
decide.
Don't, but they did.
They did. So in other words, we're surrounded by people who have made different decisions.
Okay.
And so I understand the pressure of feeling like my kid needs a phone because he or she is begging because everyone around them has their own phone or their iPad. We live in the world and we are surrounded by it. And so I understand the pressure of it, but I also know that as a parent what your kids are capable. If your kids have built up trust enough to even start with, and I would suggest starting with a phone that is not a smartphone, that is just, they still sell them actually, the phones that don't have internet access and all of that. So
yeah, I think too that, okay, so I think you are absolutely right. We've said this a number of times. The parents are in the best position to know their kid. Nobody knows your kid like you do. I would say the second piece to add to that is also spend some time getting to know technology. So there's a lot of research that we need to do as parents about technology, the nature of technology, that will help us know whether our kids are ready for that, because we may know the kid, but we also got to know technology and the power of technology. So I'm just going to pull out a stack of books here. These are the kinds of books we need to be reading. Like this book by Adam Alter, it's called Irresistible: The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked. You got to read a book like this, really, I think, before you hand over technology, to get a sobering picture of the power of technology. And I think this will help us see, in general, most kids are not ready for technology, especially the level that we give them, where we just hand over a smartphone and give them, like you said, complete access to the internet and all the apps and all.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about so many little kids that we know that have their own iPads.
Yeah.
So, like saying before you hand over technology, and I'm thinking, well, so many of us get them their own iPad when they're young, for school stuff or whatever. And so
if you read this book, you realize that if you're handing over iPads and smartphones to your kids at young ages, you are setting them up for a screen addiction. That's not an overstatement. They will become addicted to screens. There is, you look at this on a neuroscience level and what technology does to the brain and, the dopamine, the reward system in the brain. Get Irresistible and read it. There's another book called Glow Kids, How Screen Addiction is Hijacking Our Kids and How to Break the Trance. That would be another one. And that's
a really good. The Glow Kids book, I really loved. I have all those tabs in there because I really like that one. And then the two books I mentioned before.
Yeah, you mentioned Tech Wise Family by Andy Crouch, Screens and Teens. These are going to be a little bit more of kind of the nature of technology and how to practically handle it as families. The Art of Screen Time is another more practical side of things. Amusing Ourselves to Death is a really kind of a classic on. Yeah,
that's an old book that Neil Postman wrote. I forget what year it was published, but he was talking about TVs.
Yeah.
This was before even cell phone, but you read the book now and it's completely relevant, probably actually more relevant, all that he says about screens. But I'm thinking about the family, like you just said, that addiction thing, that addiction thing. You just gave that sober warning that even kind of gave me chills a little bit of that we're addicting our kids.
Yeah.
So maybe we can end with just
prayer. Like
prayer and plans about moving to a commune where we all get together. So just thinking about, because most people listening haven't waited to give our kids technology. It's in our homes, it's happening.
Yeah.
There's TVs everywhere. A lot of times there's TVs in every bedroom. So thinking about this addiction, that maybe even, like, how do we, if we're listening now as parents and thinking, okay, we've messed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Of course, we actually relate to that.
Messing up? I don't relate to that. Do you? You relate to that?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We do.
Oh, well, sometimes I relate to that.
So maybe we can just end with saying, okay, technology, we haven't had a good handle on it. So what would maybe be some good places to start? And maybe we can even weave in some things that
start with some reading.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing for us to say, hey, there needs to be some change in the behaviors of our families. There's another thing to really have the strength to make those changes. And when you read and you renew your mind with truth, that will motivate action. So I think that's the first step.
Yeah, and actually, can I just say, if we put down our technology and at night when we're normally maybe watching TV or doing our own thing and our kids see us reading a book, that alone might be like
Yeah.
What's going on, Mom and Dad? Why are you not watching your show like you always do? How come you're reading a book?
Yeah, that modeling would be a second piece of this. I would say number 3, I guess, would be is maybe if you've already kind of gone down this road, take a detox week. Take a detox couple of weeks. Like, take technology and set it aside for the family. For have some screen-free time. And I know it sounds so. Even when I say it, we're so dependent on screens, and this is where we're just going to have to look different than the rest of the world. We're going to have to do some radical things, and for the health of our families, you know what? And especially if your kids are younger, this is easier to do. So start young, but maybe you need to do a reset. Right? We need a great reset.
A detox is probably a good word, because I think that can just stoke fear in a parent's heart, because they know if they told their kid, hey, we're not doing iPads this week. We're not, how after dinner every night you get to watch a show. We're not going to do that this week. Yeah. I mean, you could have some there
could be a tantrum.
There could be some,
and so then you need to listen to our
reaction
last podcast on how to deal with tantrums.
Okay. Well, but seriously, I mean, that we know. I mean, that can, when we've reoriented and detoxed, it's not like our kids were like, "Yay! We're so glad you guys are implementing
these godly parents, Lord."
Yeah. I mean, we have dealt with breakdown. That's why detox is a good word. And actually, I think that's when you see how addicted your kids actually are, is how they react, how visceral their reaction is.
And you find out maybe how addicted we are.
Yes, by how hard it is.
I said you are, and I didn't mean you personally, and you said we are. You're very inclusive.
So typical of you to say you.
I meant them. I meant them listening out there right now. No, but seriously, it's a good reset for the entire family, some self-examination. And to say, okay, let's pull back from this. Let's do some reading together. Maybe even as a family, if your kids are older, read out of Screens and Teens together, or read out of the Tech Wise family together, and say, hey, we really want to think carefully about this, because this stuff is not neutral. It can really have an impact on our lives. Yeah. So you might need to do that. And I think the general rule, I think as I get older, it's not just getting older.
But you're so old.
It's hopefully getting wiser. But watching over time the impact of technology on our culture, on our own kids, our families, reading the research, studying things, listening to Jonathan Haidt and Gene Twenge, I may be getting a more radical position. But I think in general, our posture as parents should be hold off on the technology as long as possible. And the later, the better, because it gives your kids a chance to mature, develop some self-control. The later, the better. We just read an article a couple weeks ago about the mom who paid her kid to stay off of social media until he graduated from high school. And she paid him it was like $1,800 or something. And he did it. And he went throughout high school without having any social media. And he lived. He survived. And so it's possible.
Yeah, and just maybe we can end with this encouragement, but we have made mistakes. We have, and we've seen our family go towards bad habits, and then we've thought, oh, we're doing way too much screens. We need to detox from it. And there's a couple times I remember in particular that I thought this is going to be so hard. One, when our kids were younger, and our kids who are now adults, but they were younger, and we were in the habit of turning on the TV every day, or nowadays it would be the iPad, letting them watch a show or whatever. And I would cook dinner, and they would get to watch TV, and for me it felt like a break. They were being babysat by the TV. I got a little bit of quiet, whatever. So I totally get that. But I realized I was using technology to pacify the kids, and I didn't want to do that. And do you know what I mean by pacify? You're looking at me weird. Okay.
No,
I realized I was doing that, and I was encouraged by an older woman that I heard talking about this to build more time in our kids' lives for boredom. She was talking about this topic of boredom. And so I thought, okay, that's it. I'm doing it. So I told the kids, no more TV no more screens during the weekdays. And I said, Saturday morning will be our time to watch cartoons or whatever. And you'll get like 2 hours, basically, so you could pick a movie or you could watch some cartoons. And I strategically picked Saturday morning so that I could stay in bed in my pajamas and not have to get up. Okay, so I compromised. So I said, and I knew it was going to be hard. And it was hard because the first few days there were tears and fits, and I had to deal with...
The kids were crying also.
I had to deal with the detox for all of us. But I'm telling you, after I pushed through that hard time, the kids stopped asking to watch screens every day because it became now a different habit where instead of asking for screens, they were going outside to play, or they were playing with the Legos that were all the toys we had weren't getting played with, and now all of a sudden they were. And so it was hard. I pushed through it. And it ended up creating a really beautiful habit where the kids actually stopped nagging about, or asking for it at all. And it brought so much peace to our home. I don't know if you remember, because it was so long ago. I mean, it's such a habit now that with our other kids that came along later, they just grew up with this habit of you only watch stuff on Saturday mornings. The only exception we have of that is when we go on a date. So date night, they get to watch a movie and we order pizza.
That's why they always want us to go on dates.
Exactly. I strategically did that as well. So then they would, when we were like, oh, we're going to go on a date night, they were thrilled because they got the treat of watching a movie, which normally they don't do on weekdays. So that was just selfishly strategic as well.
That's not selfish. That's self-interest. That's healthy self-interest.
Yes.
So I think the concluding point is there's always hope. There's always time to build new habits and better habits. And so, and you got to be vigilant. You got to be persistent. You got to study. You got to prepare yourself, so that you and we can lead our kids well when it comes to technology. Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.